Before we begin this morning, I want to take a moment to reflect on last week's tragic mid-air collision above the Potomac. To the families of the 67 victims of that horrific disaster, I cannot imagine the pain that you're feeling right now. I know that I speak for all of my colleagues when I say you have our very deepest sympathies. You know, we wake up every morning not knowing what the future holds, trusting in the systems designed to keep us safe. When Sean Duffy woke up on Wednesday, his first full day as Secretary of Transportation, he did not know that it would be marked by the deadliest disaster in U.S. airspace in 2 decades. I imagine that's how Howard Lutnick felt when he woke up on the morning of September 11th, unaware of the tragedy unfolding before him, unaware that his world and ours was about to change forever. But leadership is about rising to the occasion. That's what we saw from Secretary Duffy last week, and that's what we expect to see, what his colleagues did see from Howard Lutnick, who suffered the loss of his own brother and 657 other Cantor Fitzgerald employees on 9/11. Mr. Lutnick knows the kind of pain the victims' families are facing today. His life shows that he is prepared to meet the gravest of challenges, and we need him to be. In a time of great power competition, we must, as Mr. Lutnick told us, stay in the lead. America must show the world what leadership is like, what a great economy is like. That will require decisive action. I am pleased that Mr. Lutnick will quickly direct the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, to reissue a biological opinion for offshore operations in the Gulf by May 21st. Yet I know he will also take the requisite time to listen and learn about the complexities of the Commerce Department. He will approach the job thoughtfully, considering all the relevant interests, as evident by the 44 different stakeholder groups all supporting him. I urge my colleagues to support his confirmation as Commerce Secretary. Even as my staff and I continue to investigate the cause of last Wednesday's disaster, we remain focused on our primary responsibility: passing legislation to improve the lives of the American people. Consider the Kids Off Social Media Act, which I authored alongside Senator Schatz. Today, families faced a challenge previous generations could not imagine: a rapidly changing digital environment targeting our kids. As social scientists like Jonathan Haidt have noted, the youth mental health crisis is correlated with the rise of phone-based childhood. Every parent who has ever heard, "But Sally has TikTok," or who is simply overwhelmed by the ubiquity of social media and the pernicious means by which it promotes harmful content in kids' lives, is looking for a solution. Technology is made for persons, not persons for technology. Kids need time to be kids, to experience the real world, not to get lost in the virtual one. COSMA does this by 2 means. First, it codifies what big tech companies already claim they do: keep children under 13 off of social media. And second, it removes social media distraction from schools. On top of that, it prohibits algorithmic boosting to kids under 16, which prevents big tech from pushing the harmful content that does so much damage to our children. I'm similarly proud to support the AM Radio for Every Vehicle Act with Senator Markey. AM radio is a haven for people to express differing viewpoints, allowing free speech and a robust democratic process to flourish. It also continues to be the most reliable form of emergency communication during severe weather and power outages. It's not just entertainment, it's critical to keeping us safe. No wonder this bill is supported by over half of this committee. Safety is also at the heart of the bipartisan Fire Ready Nation Act, which will improve forecasts needed to help fight wildfires. It's a particularly timely piece of legislation from Senators Cantwell and Sheehy, given the Los Angeles fires. This bill, of which I'm a co-sponsor, will establish a fire weather services program at NOAA, equipping scientists and meteorologists with the resources they need to prevent the next disaster. Finally, my illegal red snapper and tuna enforcement act, which I worked on with Senator Schatz, will equip law enforcement with tools to crack down on poaching. I urge my colleagues to support all of the bills before us today, both Republican and Democrat, as we confirm Mr. Lutnick to be Secretary of Commerce. Thank you, and I recognize the ranking member.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for today's markup and continuing the important work on so many policies that we tried to get over the goal line or out of the Senate and onto the President's desk. So much appreciate that. Let me, too, start by, in this forum, recognizing the tragic events of 2 air accidents in the last week, DCA and in Philadelphia. Mr. Chairman, our heart goes out to these families for the tragedies they are suffering, for the long-term impacts that they will have from this, and the remaining questions that they want us to answer. I am dedicated, Mr. Chairman, to moving quickly once we have information on resolutions of issues that will enhance the air safety of our system. Having worked both during COVID and in 25 days, working with Senator Wicker, came up with a transportation solution to what we needed to do for our airspace during that time period, and also working with Senator Wicker in short order after the 2 MAX crashes to push and finalize through Congress a major aviation safety bill. It is imperative that we tell the families we are going to have the same fervor now in getting aviation safety enhancements that will prevent this from happening again. So I hope that we can work together in a very bipartisan fashion, along with our 2 colleagues, Senator Duckworth and Senator Moran, the subcommittee chair and ranking member, on doing that. And I take the President at his word. The President says he wants to see an increase in aviation infrastructure. He's frustrated by the fact that on a global basis, the system of digitizing our airspace off of radar has moved faster than the United States. So great, Mr. President, we will be calling on you for your help in that effort. On the Lutnick nomination, since the hearing last week, the Trump administration has taken a series of unprecedented actions that I find very concerning. I'm very concerned about the President's threat to our North American neighbors and a massive tariffs until we resolve problems. In fact, the Wall Street Journal, quote, called it the dumbest trade war in history, end quote. Tariffs and trade wars are a major problem for my state, where 2 out of every 5 jobs are tied to trade-related industries. My state imports $20 billion of goods from Canada, primarily oil, gas, lumber, and electric power, and making our northern border with Washington one of our largest trading partners. So we just got a reprieve for this 25% crazy tariffs that the Commerce Secretary has said he's advocating for the President's policy, would cost my constituents $5 billion or more. We need a secretary that understands that these products and these issues need coalition building, not throwing down gauntlets that will lose jobs for my farmers. Over the last 4 years, there has been much investment in infrastructure manufacturing that this committee has supported. Semiconductor expansion, $450 billion right here in the United States, thanks to the CHIPS and Science Act. And Mr. Lutnick, in various answers to various members of the committee, did not give a full commitment to making sure this money continues to go out the door. These awards are crucial to catalyzing domestic chip manufacturing states like Texas, New York, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. And we heard from many members on both sides of the aisle about whether he would make continued investments in other areas. Tech hubs, NOAA, which you just mentioned, makes up more than 60% of the commerce budget. When asked, for the record, if NOAA should be dismantled, called for in 2025 project, Mr. Lutnick would only say, if confirmed, he would figure it out. Given how central NOAA is for providing accurate weather forecasting, managing our fisheries, protecting our fishermen from Russian and Chinese illegal fishing, I was looking for a stronger commitment. And last week at the hearing, I asked Mr. Lutnick about the 19.3 billion illicit transactions for Tether and whether we needed to be more aggressive at doing something about that, given the unbelievable amount of volume of North Korean, South Asian, and various criminal activities on the Tether platform. He said at some point software will solve that problem. Well, having been in the software sector, yeah, someday it might. But right now, I want to stop the amount of money laundering going through these organizations, and I would hope that he would commit to something much more aggressive than that. Lastly, I thought we had a pretty good answer in the Finance Committee to Mr. Bessent when asked about the same issues of Treasury settlements. You cannot have the United States, someone advocating that treasuries could get settled on a foreign exchange at a time when we can't even raise the debt ceiling and then have them prioritize the debt away from the United States. I just can't accept his answer. So I hope that we will be proven wrong, but today my advice and consent is not to vote for Mr. Lutnick. I hope that, Mr. Chairman, we could come to some agreement in the future about FBI briefings. This is just not acceptable. In the past, the committee worked to try to give members as much as 7 days advance notice on the paperwork for both the OG paperwork and the FBI. I accommodated the committee with our Secretary of Transportation nominee and even helped move the hearing from 11 o'clock in the morning, which we didn't have the FBI paperwork, to 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Somewhere that day we got the paperwork. Maybe you could think that that was a little less complex, that real world background isn't as interesting as Wall Street background. But nonetheless, yesterday at midday, faced with a briefing, not from the FBI, but from the White House, the counsel directly reporting to the President of the United States did the briefing. He told me that the FBI was just the ancillary collector of the information. I found that very interesting, challenging, tried to wrap my mind around it, but this hearing was already scheduled. So I hope that we can come to a future accommodation that we will at least give members 24 hours. I'd advocate for 7 days, but at least 24 hours before this FBI briefing process. Members have the information, they can communicate to our down dais members. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to turn to the bills at hand, and as I mentioned in my previous comments, I support this markup in 17 bills that are on here. 12 were advanced out of the committee in the last Congress, and 5 of those passed the Senate, so I hope we get them now through the House and all the way to the President's desk. And separately, 5 additional bills were negotiated with our House colleagues, which shows a great deal of bipartisan work from our colleagues and what they have done to try to move progress. I very much appreciate the S-99, Strengthening Support for American Manufacturers by Senators Peter and Blackburn. I very much support the Drives Act by Senator Fisher and Duckworth and Blackburn, the Promoting Resilient Supply Chain that I authored with our colleagues, Senator Blackburn and Blunt Rochester, because I think this is a very ripe issue for our committee to continue to focus on. I so much appreciate the support of the Tickets Act by Senator Schmidt and Markey, the Fire Ready Nation by myself and Senator Sheehy. I look forward to working with him as the Pacific Northwest has been a pretty good, let's just say, I don't know whether Senator Sheehy agrees, but I think we probably have at least a 10-year run on everybody else already of dealing with this problem. So our ideas about technologies and solutions that have worked already that need to be expedited, I think we have a good viewpoint on that. And then the AM radio bill, Mr. Chairman, very much appreciate your and Senator Markey's continued push for this legislation. I represent a state prone to natural disasters. I don't know what to say, whether it's Mount St. Helens, whether it's the fires I just mentioned, unbelievable flooding given the big storms that we're hit with. And I like the notion that we are going to have good old-fashioned ham radio and car radios. I just think that we need to continue to have emergency response for people and think outside the box of how to skill that. Now, you think, well, that doesn't sound, well, go read the article that somebody wrote called The Big One. Is the big one going to hit the Pacific Northwest? Are we going to be at a point where we're going to be devastated from a grand implosion volcano experience that might just cause a lahar from Mount Rainier? The consequences are as devastating as some of the major events in the Louisiana and the South. So I hope that we will do something that thinks outside the box on how to keep communication going and not just respond to some of the requests by people that think that the digital solution is just the only solution. And lastly, Mr. Chairman, not on the agenda, but I hope that we will continue our focus on rail safety. I know the Vice President went to East Palestine, and I look forward to working with you on that issue. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Moran.
Mr. Chairman, thank you and Senator Cantwell for the expression of care and condolences for the victims of the flight that crashed here at Reagan National last Wednesday. Thank you to all the members of the Senate, including those on this committee who've expressed condolences to me and to Senator Marshall on behalf of our constituents in Kansas. And thank you for the leadership that both of you are and will provide as Senator Duckworth and I join you in efforts to determine facts and steps forward. I appreciate all the sentiments that have been expressed and the care and concern of my colleagues.
Thank you, Senator Moran. I now recognize Senator Thune for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I move that PN 11-9, the nomination of Howard Lutnick to be the Secretary of Commerce, be reported favorably.
Is there a second?
Second.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Thune?
Aye.
Mr. Wicker?
Aye.
Mrs. Fisher? Mr. Moran? Mr. Sullivan? Mrs. Blackburn? Mr. Young? Mr. Budd? Mr. Schmidt? Mr. Curtis? Mr. Moreno? Mr. Sheehy? Mrs. Capito? Ms. Lummis? Ms. Cantwell? Mrs. Klobuchar?
No.
Mr. Schatz? Mr. Markey? Mr. Peters? Ms. Baldwin? Ms. Duckworth? Ms. Rosen? Mr. Lujan? Mr. Hickenlooper?
No by proxy.
Mr. Fetterman?
Yes by proxy.
Mr. Kim? Ms. Blunt Rochester? Mr. Cruz?
Aye.
The ayes are 16. The noes are 12.
The motion is agreed to and the nomination is ordered to be reported favorably. I now recognize Ranking Member Cantwell for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that S-281, the Ticket Act, as amended by Cantwell 1, as modified, be reported favorably.
Is there a second? Is there any discussion?
Mr. Chairman?
Senator Markey.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Mr. Chairman, I appreciate this committee hearing, and I appreciate the bipartisan nature of the markup and the bills that are moving. But it is difficult to sit here and hold a bipartisan markup when President Trump and Elon Musk and their team of government arsonists are blatantly violating the law by withholding federal funds, seizing control of critical government systems, and even proposing to eliminate whole agencies by executive fiat. Given the lawlessness reigning at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, why should we believe that the federal government will implement anything that Congress passes? It is more than a bit ridiculous that this committee is proceeding with business as usual in this climate. I filed marquee amendment number 1 on my own legislation, the Ticket Act, to address an especially concerning abuse of government power. Over the weekend, Elon Musk and the Doge team physically seized control of a critical payment system at the Treasury Department, locked out the career employees, and proposed to start cutting off payments based on random tweets or messages. This takeover is at the heart of irresponsibility. Musk and his team now have access to sensitive personal information of millions of Americans, including their Social Security numbers and bank account information. They could shut off payments to Musk competitors, given his companies an unfair competitive advantage. And more likely, they will accidentally shut off payments that are critical for Americans to afford food, housing, and medicine. Marquee number 1 would make it a violation of the Federal Trade Commission Act for the following individuals to access Treasury's central payment system. Number 1, a member of the public. Number 2, a career staffer who is also an executive officer or controlling shareholder of a company. Or 3, a political appointee who has not yet signed an ethics agreement. This amendment ensures that only individuals without a conflict of interest and who have a verified role in the federal government have access to these sensitive systems. Before last week, it might have seemed absurd to pass legislation to limit access to Treasury's payment systems, but Musk and his gang's recent actions demand an urgent legislative response to safeguard this critical financial infrastructure. My colleagues may argue that the Federal Trade Commission Act is a strange mechanism to block access to Treasury's payment system, but that access creates the type of privacy, cybersecurity, and competition risks that are at the heart of the Federal Trade Commission's mission and were the reason that Congress passed the Federal Trade Commission Act over a century ago. I believe that this is a critical amendment. I'm proud to partner on the AM Radio Act with you, but even if these bills pass, I have no confidence that this administration will implement the good work that this committee has done. So I urge my colleagues to stand up for our powers as the first branch of government, defend our legislative prerogative, and send a message to this administration that we will not roll over in the face of obstruction, coercion, and lawlessness, and I urge my colleagues to vote yes.
I thank my friend from Massachusetts, but nevertheless, I urge my colleagues to oppose this amendment. This amendment has nothing to do with the Ticket Act, and it is not within the jurisdiction of this committee. This amendment, unfortunately, is nothing more than a clear partisan political attack on Elon Musk, whom the president has tasked with running the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE. In November, the American people resoundingly voted for President Trump. Naturally, President Trump is implementing the agenda that the American people voted for. Contrary to the Democrat opinion, there is no fourth branch of government known as the administrative state. No one elected the bureaucracy. DOGE is an office within the White House led by Elon Musk to eliminate wasteful government spending and to reduce unnecessary regulations. To fulfill its mission and review wasteful government spending, DOGE and its staff, including Elon Musk, must have access to data, including data in the federal payment system, to fulfill its mission requested by the president. And I would note that in just a matter of a couple of weeks, they've already found considerable waste, fraud, and abuse, in particular within USAID. Among the things they discovered that the previous administration was spending money on were $1.5 million for advancing DEI in Serbia's workplaces, $2 million for sex changes in Guatemala, $6 million for tourism in Egypt, paying for, quote, hundreds of thousands of meals that went to al-Qaeda-affiliated fighters in Syria, funds for the production of opium the primary ingredient in heroin in Afghanistan, which chiefly benefited the Taliban. $1 million to help disabled people in Tajikistan become, quote, climate leaders. $1 million to a Hamas-linked charity, and $15 million for contraceptives and condoms in Taliban-controlled Afghanistan. You will forgive President Trump and the American people for thinking these expenditures are unnecessary and wasteful. And unfortunately, the hysterical doomsday scenarios of data tampering, privacy concerns, or payment delays or rerouting touted by Senate Democrats are false and were dispelled by the Department of Treasury last night in a letter that they sent to Ranking Member Wyden on the Senate Finance Committee. The President is entitled to conduct full review of federal agency spending and regulations through the DOGE, and I intend to do everything I can to help ensure that its important mission is carried out. Litigating these partisan matters in this amendment or in this bill isn't appropriate. It's outside the committee's jurisdiction, and I urge my colleagues to oppose the amendment.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, thank you. I think this is within our jurisdiction because it deals with the FTC. So I very much appreciate Senator Markey raising this issue. When we worked on a privacy bill, we do not want the privacy of American citizens to be violated. We know that we have international adversaries who are also looking for this information and using it against us. That is why our own system has been hacked by them. So I want every precaution necessary to make sure that the privacy of U.S. citizens is guaranteed. So the notion that this process has taken place, I think, is unprecedented. What kind of personal data is at risk? Social Security numbers, bank account information, home addresses, tax records. And so I hope that we will address this issue. I do plan to support Senator Markey's amendment. If you're interested in having a larger discussion in our committee, I'm not sure that this will stop within our committee. I'm pretty sure it's going to be a larger discussion. But I do think that we have to be on record of saying we are going to fight even the government's, the U.S. government's unlawful process of getting information from U.S. citizens. I will fight and continue to fight any administration that is somehow going to give an easy path to something that I believe needs to be defended. I think, and
Would the senator from Washington yield briefly?
I'm finished.
Thank you, sir. There is no branch of the federal government called Elon Musk. Cutting waste and fraud is one thing, and this committee could do that, by the way. We could vote out wherever we see waste and fraud. That's what this committee is set up for. But unilaterally shutting down congressionally authorized agencies, that's lawlessness. And we have to make sure that we don't allow that to happen within our own jurisdiction, just by the unilateral fiat of Elon Musk. So we just have to protect our own prerogatives. So again, I would urge an aye vote on my amendment.
Speak on it after we vote. I will give time for whoever else would like to speak. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Thune?
No.
Mr. Wicker?
No by proxy.
Mrs. Fisher? No. Mr. Moran?
No by proxy.
Mr. Sullivan? No. Mrs. Blackburn? Mr. Young? No. Mr. Budd? Mr. Schmidt? No. Mr. Curtis? No. Mr. Moreno? No. Mr. Sheehy? No. Mrs. Capito?
No by proxy.
Ms. Lummis? No. Ms. Cantwell?
Aye.
Ms. Klobuchar?
Aye by proxy.
Mr. Schatz? Mr. Markey? Aye. Mr. Peters? Aye. Ms. Baldwin? Aye. Ms. Duckworth? Aye. Ms. Rosen? Aye. Mr. Lujan? Aye. Mr. Hickenlooper?
Aye by proxy.
Mr. Fetterman?
Aye by proxy.
Mr. Kim? Aye. Ms. Blunt Rochester?
Aye by proxy.
Mr. Cruz?
No.
The noes are 15, the yeses are 13.
The noes have it. The amendment is not adopted. Were there any other members that were wishing to speak? Senator Schatz, did you want to?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
Just very briefly on the matter we were just discussing. Thank you, Chairman. I just want all of my Republican colleagues to just remember that there will be a Democratic president and there will be a duly enacted law, an agency, maybe it's the Department of Defense, maybe it's the CIA, and we really just have to remember that the door swings both ways in Washington, and if we're going to enact laws and have any president of any party consider agencies optional, consider spending bills optional, it's a really, really dangerous precedent. You may agree substantively with the particular shutdowns of the particular agencies, but just wait until a liberal president reaches into the CIA or foreign military financing or the F-35 or something they don't like and just decides to freeze the spending. I do think it's quite dangerous, and I just want, in the least aggressive way possible, for you all to just think about the consequences when there's a president of the other party.
Mr. Chairman, could I respond to that, please?
Sure, Senator Young.
Just briefly responding, my very good friend, and he is a very good friend of mine. I have great respect, and I don't question his sincerity in his comment, but let's acknowledge that this environment has in part been created over the last 4 years by an extremist interpretation of our laws, one embraced by and fueled by many of my very good friends on the other side of the aisle. An example would be student loan forgiveness, unilateral student loan forgiveness. Where in the heck were many of my earnest colleagues in the midst of that situation? So, you know, we can interpret certain laws and authorities in different ways. It is important that we be vigilant. But a bit of self-reflection at times like these, when such concerns are vocalized, would be helpful.
Mr. President.
Senator Sullivan.
I just wanted to add, and then congratulate Mr. Lutnick. I wanted to add to Senator Young's points. 4 years ago, one of the first orders of the Biden administration was to halt all exploration and activity on the North Slope of Alaska for oil drilling. We had hundreds, if not, you know, close to 1,000 people whose jobs were on the line. They were working, trying to do work to develop energy in my state, and the administration came and said, sorry, you guys working there on the North Slope, you're all going to be laid off. Why? I don't know. They did it. So, you know, this is an issue that it certainly happened the last 4 years, so I think I agree with what Senator Young mentioned. I want to congratulate Mr. Lutnick. I do want to echo Senator Cantwell's comment about NOAA. I think six or seven of the bills that we just passed out of committee today unanimously all dealt with NOAA. So Mr. Lutnick was great in his hearing on fisheries, on fish issues. I think he's going to be fantastic on that, but you need to do that with a strong NOAA. If you want to strengthen it, you want to review it, let's do that. But, you know, getting rid of NOAA is not a good idea, and 6 or 7 bills in committee today, which all focused on NOAA in a bipartisan way, I think is indicative of that.
Mr. Chairman, again, I just would add to that, if you think about what my both colleagues have highlighted here, I would add to that the BEAD program, which passed over 3 years ago and hasn't put out a single dollar of assistance to a single provider of telecom services in rural areas. Why? Because the Biden administration modified the statute and added a bunch of conditions that nobody can meet. So this is something that administrations do, and I think it's important, as my colleague pointed out, for a little self-reflection.
All right, now I would ask, I'm happy to have robust debate, but we do have to maintain a quorum. We need 15, and there are only 17 of us left, so I would ask that we move. We got a bunch of bills everyone wants to move, so let's move the bills, and then anyone... And then anyone who wants to stay, I'll stay as long as you want to give remarks. But let's if we can conduct our business first. Senator Lujan, you had an amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I plan to withdraw my amendment, but I still have concerns that these ticket procurement services will cause the same problems as speculative ticketing. But I understand that this bill is a compromise, and it does include needed reforms. However, I am disappointed that this markup did not include the Main Event Act, which is legislation I worked on with Senator Blackburn, and does include important provisions that I believe are widely supported on this committee. Now, I understand my staff was given a commitment from the chair's staff that Main Event will be on a future markup this year. I appreciate the email we received as well. I pray, Mr. Chairman, that we get that up on the next markup, if at all possible. And with that, I withdraw my amendment and I yield.
Thank you, Senator Lujan, and I know that an update of the BOTS Act is important to both you and Senator Blackburn, and so you have my commitment to working with both of you on that legislation and to working to put the Main Event Ticketing Act on a subsequent markup. If there's no further discussion, the question is now on Senator Cantwell's motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. The motion is agreed to, and the bill as amended is ordered to be reported favorably. I recognize Ranking Member Cantwell for a motion.
I move that S93, Harmful Algae Bloom and Hypoxia Research Control Act Amendments of 2025, S98, the Rural Broadband Protection Act of 2025, the S99, Strengthening Support for American Manufacturing Act, S161, She Drives Acts as amended by the Fisher Substitute, S195, America Music Tourism Act, S216, Save Our Seas 2.0 Amendments Act, S245, Ensure Cybersecurity Act of 2025, S246, Interstate Transport Act of 2025, S257, Promoting Resiliency Supply Chains Act of 2025 as amended by Peters 1, S258, the Tornado Act as amended by Bud 1, S260, Bottles and Breastfeeding Equipment Screening Enhancement Act, S278, Kids Off Social Media Act, S283, Illegal Red Snapper and Tuna Enforcement Act, S306, Fire Ready Nation Act of 2025, S314, Hotel Fees Transparency Act of 2025, and S315, AM Radio for Every Vehicle Act of 2025 as amended by the Markey Cruz substitute be favorably reported.
Is there a second? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman.
The motion is...
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to register a no on agenda item number 17.
Let me just finish.
Okay, sorry.
The motion is agreed to and the bills are ordered to be reported favorably. Go ahead, Senator Curtis.
Yeah, excuse me, I'd like to register a no on agenda item number 17, S13 AM Radio for Every Vehicle Act.
Okay, without objection.
Mr. Chairman.
Ranking Member Cantwell.
Senator Kim would like to be recorded as a no on S246, and Senator Markey would like to be recorded as a no on S278.
They will both be so recorded. I ask for unanimous consent that staff are authorized to make technical and conforming changes. Without objection, so ordered. That concludes today's votes. Are there any members of the committees that still wishing to make remarks?
Mr. Chairman?
Senator Lujan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now, a growing number of our nation's children and teens are struggling with their mental health. Everyone here remembers what it was like to be a teenager, I hope. Growing up in a world that was big and sometimes overwhelming. Unlike today's kids, we didn't grow up with the 24/7 news cycle, social media, and online bullying. Now, I support actions to protect our nation's kids and teens from the harms of social media, but this committee and this Congress must go further to protect our nation's youth. I worry actions today will also pale in comparison to the current dismantling of institutions and programs that are critical to the health and future of our nation's children. If Congress truly cares about our kids, then every single member, not just of this committee, but of this Senate and the House, should be up in arms regarding reports that this administration will soon weaken or even eliminate the United States Department of Education. If Congress is serious about taking care of kids, we would not allow a single penny to be taken or withdrawn from programs like Medicaid, Children's Health Insurance Program, or Head Start, a program that I believe Raphael Warnock are the two graduates that are currently members of the United States Senate. Now, if Congress is serious about protecting the health of our kids, we would not vote to confirm a known anti-vaccine conspiracy theorist to be our nation's top health official. And if Congress is serious about protecting kids, We should protect, not threaten programs like Wi-Fi hotspots programs under the E-rate that ensure kids have the connectivity they need to be connected at home. The promise of AI and tutors, of telemedicine for our veterans with this connectivity, just all the rest. It's just, I certainly hope that we can have that conversation and have that debate. It's important for the American people. And if Congress is serious about taking care of the next generation of leaders, we should do everything in our power to give America's children a better life and the tools they need to succeed, no matter where they come from. The mental health crisis for our children and teens is serious. And I certainly hope and I pray, Mr. Chairman, that this is an area where we can truly find common ground and compromise and have real conversations about these programs. They made a difference in my life growing up. They make a difference in the people that I go to church with. They make a difference in the people that I played against in high school sports or elementary sports and things of that nature. So I certainly hope that we can find that. I appreciate the time, Mr. Chairman. I yield.
Thank you. Senator Fisher.
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the bipartisan support of the committee in advancing my legislation, the She Drives Act. The She Drives Act makes important enhancements to the crashworthiness testing procedures, requiring the use of updated crash test dummies, including both male and female models. Women are 17% more likely to be killed in an auto crash than men. This legislation works to address this disparity, and it will save lives. Thank you again to the committee for your support and to my colleagues, Senators Duckworth, Blackburn, and Murray, for their support in introducing the legislation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Do we have any other members wishing to speak? If not, this concludes our markup for today. Thank you to my colleagues, and the executive session is adjourned.